Please stand for the procession of the flags. standing for the national anthem of Saint Lucia. Please be seated. Thank you very much. His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Errol M. Charles, Governor General of St. Lucia, the Honorable Mir Amor Motley, KCMP, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, MP, Acting Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Justice Adrian Saunders, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, the Honorable Dame Janice M. Pereira, DBE, LLD, Chief Justice of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, other honorable heads of judiciaries of the Caribbean, the Honorable Leslie Mondesir, Attorney General of St. Lucia, Her Excellency Ms. Lillian Chatterjee, High Commissioner of Canada to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, other ambassadors and heads of mission, honorable judges of the Caribbean Court of Justice, honorable justices of appeal, High Court, judges and masters of the judiciaries of the Caribbean, Mr. Benjamin Emmanuel, Cabinet Secretary of St. Lucia, Mr. Darzrian Green, Director of Public Prosecutions of St. Lucia, registrars, parish court judges, magistrates, and other judicial officers, presidents of the constituent bar associations, heads of stakeholder organizations, members of the inner bar, members of the outer bar, conference participants, other special invited guests, members of the media, facilitators and presenters joining us remotely. With all the protocols having been formally established by me, I invite all speakers to adopt these protocols for the duration of the proceedings. This will allow the program to flow smoothly and help us to observe the allotted session times and avoid the repetition of the salutations. I'm Roxanne George, Chief Justice Acting of Guyana. I'm your conference chair for today's proceedings. A very, very pleasant good morning to you all. The Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, fondly known as CAJO, is pleased and privileged to host this, the 7th Biennial Conference of Judicial Officers here in St. Lucia. I now invite the Honorable Justice Peter Jamadar, Chairperson of the CAJO, to formally welcome you. Justice Jamadar.
Bonjour, or should I say in St. Lucia, bonjour. It is the tradition at the CAJO to always start these conferences with an inclusive prayer. And so I invite you now to just pause for a moment as I lead in this invocation. Creator of the universe, of worlds seen and unseen, in whom we live and move and exist, you whose presence infuses us with the values of dignity, equality, and justice. We come together in humble gratitude and open receptivity, seeking inspiration, encouragement, and new ways of being as we live in this world and offer our service to those who seek it. May this 7th conference of the CAJO be successful. Let your spirit of justice lead our deliberations and guide our actions and decisions. May we find meaning in our sharing and camaraderie in our community. Shalom, Shanti, Salam, Dargelo, Hey, peace, peace to all. Your Excellency, Governor General of Saint Lucia, Excellency High Commissioner of Canada, Deputy Prime Minister, Chief Justices, Chancellor, Judicial Officers, friends. With your permission, I adopt the order of protocols established by Chief Justice George. Thank you. Welcome to Saint Lucia. Let that be the first word that, well, among the first words that I speak. Welcome to Saint Lucia. Are we going to give a round of applause just to be here? And welcome to this, the 7th conference of the CAJO. How good it is for judicial officers to gather together in person and not virtually. And to do so here in the land of the Pitons in Saint Lucia, under the patronage of the ECSC, Dame Janice, and with the hospitality of all the people of Saint Lucia. As Caribbean people, we celebrate life, and this conference is both an educational event as well as a time for renewal of friendships and for the forging of new ones. In your conference bags is the report of the work of the CAJO for the tenure of the Management Committee elected in Belize, which I have had the honor to lead. It has been 3 years, and if I may say so, self-servingly, admittedly, we have on your behalf accomplished a lot. We have done so by innovating how we communicate and how we do research and deliver judicial education and training. Our interventions have been regional, territorial, and international. And so I invite you to look over what we have done when you have some time. It's in your conference bags, and see how we have served the region, albeit this is but a summary. I need to say that this has only been possible through the unwavering efforts and voluntary service of your Management Committee. And for those members of the Management Committee who are here with us today in Saint Lucia, I invite you to stand. Please stand, those of you who are here. If not, I'm going to call you by name. I know who is here. The CAJO also has 3 members of staff, an executive administrator, Candice Simmons, who is here with us, a legal officer, Larissa Pena, and a research and program coordinator, Elron Elahi. These 3 are the backbone of the CAJO and have been integral to its success, but the truth is, without them, what we have done in the 3 years would not have been possible, and I ask you to express our appreciation. There are 3 concepts that have informed and driven the work and mission of the CAJO since the Belize conference. And these are encapsulated in the words educate, enlighten, and empower. Our research, training, publications, and collaborations all seek to be grounded in these and to deliver interventions that impart them to those institutions and those persons who we serve. Thus, one clear focus of our work is transformation. The transformation of judicial systems and of judicial officers. The transformation of the justice sector. For example, our inventions on the invitations of Chief Justices in the Bahamas and Jamaica include intensive experiential work on their CPRs and in the TCI with respect to contemporary forms of slavery, and regionally on judicial wellness, the future of courts, and performance standards. Indeed, all Chief Justices and heads of judiciary who are present here have been presented by the CAJO with Professor Susskind's seminal work on the future of courts. This conference themed Caribbean Judiciaries in a Changing World is also informed by the desire to educate, to enlighten, and to empower. How else will we respond to the changes that swirl around us, that sometimes twirl and topple us, as we have experienced during this time that we call the time of the pandemic? Allow me to just highlight a few notable features of this 2022 conference. For example, we are making a conscious attempt to reduce our carbon footprint and to be more environmentally sensitive. For Caribbean states, this is an imperative. Most of our pre-programming processes have been, and things such as our evaluations will be electronic. Now, I know that for some of you, for me also, this may be a little bit frustrating. But let's support each other and learn together in ways that can help save our planet. Secondly, we have introduced a code of conduct. It's in your conference bags. A code of conduct for this event. This is something new for the CAJO, a first attempt to set benchmarks for encouraged and discouraged behaviors at our events, and indeed for the work and how we work, the work that we do and how we work with each other. It is not perfect, yet we ask you to embrace the intent, and I invite you to peruse it. Thirdly, several presenters will join us virtually. This is not just driven by pragmatics, but also by an attempt by the CAJO to take the lessons learned from the pandemic and include them in how we work. In every crisis, there are opportunities, and if we pause and take the time to look, we can discover them. And then we can leverage them to our advantage. It cannot be back to business as usual. The pandemic should be teaching us at least one thing: to survive and thrive, we must adapt in an ever-changing world. And so we invite you to join us in this new adventure into hitherto unknown spaces and ways of doing things. It is our hope that you will all find meaning and value in what we offer over the next 3 days. And now that we can meet again in person, some will say, especially the extroverts among us, and we know who you are and you know who you are, finally. The amount of hugs and kisses and exclamations and squeals that I have seen, I'm not complaining, I've been the beneficiary of so many wonderful hugs. Finally, 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 together again in person. Let us enjoy this time of learning and of socializing. We as the CAJO, you and I, together we know that when we share resources, when we learn and play together, that we are stronger and better for it. Together we can constructively innovate and co-create our legal systems, our laws, and our people. And isn't this our vocation? To serve Caribbean peoples through the reform and development of a relevant and meaningful Caribbean jurisprudence? To deliver justice for real people, living real lives in real time? That's what we hope this conference can help us do better. The CAJO remains ready and willing to assist. We thank Dame Janice and the ECSC for so generously hosting this conference. We thank the CAJO, CCJ, and the ECSC local organizing teams who have given their all and more to make this conference happen. We thank the organizations that have sponsored this conference, and we thank you all for attending. Please give everyone an appreciative round of applause. May our time together bear much fruit and many lasting friendships. May our time be graced and filled with inspirations. May we leave St. Lucia evermore renewed and reinvigorated. On behalf of the Management Committee of the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, we welcome you all. Merci.
Thank you very much, Justice Jamadar, for that synopsis of the work of CAJO over the past 3 years, and for those warm words of welcome, which have definitely set the tone for our conference. CAJO has developed relationships over the years. These relationships have inured to the benefit of judiciaries across our region. The following speaker represents a friend of CAJO and the region. I invite Her Excellency, Ms. Lillian Chatterjee, High Commissioner of Canada to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, to bring us greetings.
Thank you, Chief Justice and Chair, for your welcome and for establishing protocol for this event. I bring to you warm greetings from the people and government of Canada. It is a pleasure to be here with you in person, and since I know and have worked with so many of you, I know I am among friends. The Government of Canada is pleased to have been a long-time sponsor of this conference. Canada has an established and close relationship with the people and governments of CARICOM. We share core values that uphold the dignity of the human being and which provides the foundation of the rule of law. For over 4 decades, Canada has supported justice reform in the Caribbean. Many of you would recall our consultations with you in 2011 that led to our current 2 regional projects in justice reform, which started in 2014 and were both conceptualized and implemented by key stakeholders in the region. I am, of course, referring to the Judicial Reform and Institutional Strengthening Project, jurist, a $20 million project implemented by the Caribbean Court of Justice, and the Improved Access to Justice in the Caribbean, Impact Justice project, a second $20 million project implemented by the University of the West Indies. In addition to these 2 regional initiatives, we also have a number of bilateral projects supporting the justice sector in the Caribbean, such as the Social Justice in Jamaica, the SoJust project, with a budget of $12 million being implemented by the UNDP. Similarly, we have been supporting the court system in Guyana and are continuing to provide social justice programming in that country. Our regional projects have allowed us to ensure the participation of 13 CARICOM member states and enable these states to lead their own reform and define their own solutions. While some activities are regional in nature, many are in direct response to national needs and are able to help countries adapt to changes in their environment. For example, during the pandemic, we were able to assist with the setup of equipment for virtual hearings, and through public legal education and media work, we could help courts reach their users. I'm sharing our history of support to justice reform to demonstrate the importance of this sector to Canada as part of our commitment to support resilience in the Caribbean. Under Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy, we consider inclusive governance to be fundamental to long-term sustainable development and an effective justice system able to meet the needs of all segments of the population as a key component of governance. Governance that is inclusive is essential to advancing democratic values and respect for diversity, human rights, and equality before the law. Through our support to the justice sector, Canada's objective is to foster equitable access to justice, to advance the human rights of the poorest and most marginalized of vulnerable people in the Caribbean. This involves improving the gender responsiveness of justice and law enforcement institutions, ensuring that justice services reach people in their communities and increasing people's legal awareness. I applaud the innovations the region has set in place to date. For example, the work of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court in Antigua and Barbuda in setting up the Sexual Offences Model Court, and the work of Guyana in setting up similar specialized courts to hear sexual offense matters. Just last week, the Jurist Project launched a revision of the model guidelines for sexual offenses cases in the Caribbean, which has informed the work of these model or specialized courts. Jurist has also developed gender protocols for the courts and provided gender adjudication training to many judges. The project has worked with you to develop much-needed bench books for Caribbean judges and magistrates. People living in poverty and marginalized groups may not be aware of their legal rights and often lack legal protection and access to mechanisms to remedy their grievances, resulting in increasing vulnerability. One of these vulnerable groups are people with disabilities. In February 2020, Jurist and Impact Justice Project hosted regional stakeholders to a meeting in Trinidad to take stock of the progress made in justice reform and concluded there was still a significant gap in providing court services to persons with disabilities. To understand this gap, Impact Justice and Jurist supported a regional situational analysis with a report which captures both qualitative and quantitative data on persons with disabilities experiences within the justice system and judicial officers' knowledge, perception of disabilities, and access to the court systems. I understand that CAJO is partnering with jurists on developing sustainable activity based on this work beyond the life of the Jurist Project, and I applaud CAJO for these efforts. Jurist has also worked to improve the overall functioning of the justice system with improved case management, as well as enhanced business continuity planning for regional and national courts to manage disruptions caused by the pandemic. Canada is so pleased to have been able to support the results to date, and we will continue to promote, through our international assistance, equitable access to a functioning justice system and public institutions. Thank you, merci beaucoup. Bonne journée.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner Chatterjee, and we must thank the government and people of Canada for the support of the justice sector in our region. Our host country has been most gracious in accommodating us. I now have the honor of welcoming Acting Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Dr. Ernest Hilaire, to the podium. Dr. Hilaire.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. I will be guided by your advice to adopt the protocol that's already established, but I trust you will allow me to recognize the presence of the Acting Governor General of St. Lucia, Cyril Errol Charles. And I also wish to recognize another person who is present. A lot, when I do indicate, you'll understand why I'm doing so. We have in our presence a lady, the first female commissioner of police in St. Lucia, Acting Commissioner Pelios. I think it's a very powerful statement of the changing world that we live in now, where women can find their rightful place according to their abilities. I want to start by saying, bonjour tout le monde, sakafet. I have the easiest task today. The Prime Minister has asked me to be here. And if the Prime Minister asks you to be somewhere, you need to take note and act accordingly. And he wanted to apologize for not being present with you today. The Attorney General has also asked me to apologize for his absence. I think the Prime Minister would have been delighted to be with you this morning, to be able to inform you of a number of developments in St. Lucia that is of interest to you. Of particular note, he would want to inform you that St. Lucia has commenced steps to accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. In August this year, we got the formal no objection from the United Kingdom to allow us to initiate steps to achieve that goal. In October, we tabled in Parliament for first reading the St. Lucia Constitution Amendment Bill, and there is a 90-day between the first reading and second reading, so we anticipate that we will enact the changes in early 2023, and in so doing will become the 5th jurisdiction to accede to the Caribbean Court of Justice. The Prime Minister would be pleased to tell you that this is another step for us as a post-colonial society to assert the true meaning of our sovereignty, the capacity for us in the region to be able to make decisions on matters of critical importance. It is also another step along the process of national self-determination, where we can boast that we do have the capacity as a region and as an island for us to meet the needs of our people, especially in the sphere of the justice system. It would also be interesting, as a Prime Minister, a politician, to reflect on what a changing world is bringing forth to Caribbean judiciaries. I note that in the pandemic, well, we still are in the pandemic period, we were all forced to learn new ways of doing things, and some may say more efficient ways of doing things. You would have learned the importance of virtual engagements. But the changing world is even more than this. And I sat and was just reflecting on what really is a changing world and how it's going to affect judiciaries. We live in what is called a post-truth society. And as politicians, we can engage in variations of the truth and sometimes constructed realities. But as members of the judiciary, you don't have that latitude. The truth is the truth. How do you operate in a period when social media in particular, the new modes of communication, are becoming so powerful in influencing people? How do you avoid becoming irrelevant with all the changes that are taking place, when the cynicism is at an all-time high and is still going to plague us and maybe even get worse? And like I said, as politicians, we can dabble as much as we can. You don't have that space. What is your legitimacy going to be based on? How will people accept your legitimacy when individuals can access Facebook, Instagram, and all the other social media and say anything about any judge, about any judgment? And what is the consequence? As politicians, we rebut. We engage in the exchanges in that space. Can you afford to do that? How are you going to deal with those issues? I would love to hear a discussion from the most eminent persons in this room on issues like this. And I think in this room, We have the largest gathering, or probably the best gathering of thinkers and intellectuals in this region. So this is a very special place where such a dialogue can take place. And it's something I wish that, you know, there would be some reflection on it. I have a lot of regard, I must say to you, for judicial officers. There's a special gentleman in this room who had a profound impact on my upbringing, my nurturing. So much so, it was for that I was going to study law. And I remember once he asked me why I did not decide to study law. And I told him I wanted to do something more meaningful. And I ended up in cricket and in politics. I'm not sure how more meaningful that is, given West Indies did not qualify for the World Cup. But we have some of the best thinkers in there. And we have, as politicians, have not found answers to the issue of artificial intelligence, the issue of social media and its impact on society. And maybe you can come up with some of those answers. But as Minister of Culture, I also want to extend greetings to all of you and to say to you, I'm really delighted I saw so many persons displaying Creole colors this morning. I think it was fantastic to walk into the gathering and see. This is a very special time of the year for us. It's a time when we observe and celebrate our Creoleness. A former Prime Minister once said that the French came in and gave us our joie de vivre, the English came to tame it, and our Africanness is always exalted. So in many ways, our Creoleness is a reflection of those many influences that we have on us. I hope you take the opportunity over the next few days to enjoy some of our celebrations and our Creoleness. I tease my friends who are lawyers that judicial people are the stiffest people and they don't know how to enjoy themselves. You don't really see judges out enjoying and the judicial officers enjoying the niceties of the society. But I hope you do take off your robe and take off all your trappings and enjoy some of our Creole food and drink. There'll be a lot of food eaten over the next few days, a lot of drink. And I ask you to enjoy our Creole celebrations. Saint Lucia is a very special place. And I'm also Minister of Tourism, so I will say to you, it's the best island in the Caribbean to visit. It is. Saint Lucia is the only island to be named after a woman. The only island. And you'd have heard of the Helen of Troy, the most beautiful expression of splendidness. And when the colonialists arrived, they looked at St. Lucia and they said, Helen of the West, named after the Helen of Troy, because of the extraordinary beauty of St. Lucia. So you are in a very special place. I think the lawyers and judges would know, at least I learned it in history, that we have a British criminal code and a French civil code, which makes us even more unique. So we have so much that we can boast of as an island. I ask you to enjoy some of it, and welcome to St. Lucia. I do hope that you have a successful conference. I know, looking at the agenda, that it will be very rich in discussion and debate, and I wish you well. And on behalf of the Prime Minister, please accept his best wishes for the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hilaire, for your kind words of welcome to St. Lucia. Just to tell you that the local organizing committee has done well, and we will enjoy some St. Lucian heritage and fare, I think, Friday evening. And of course, we're extremely happy about your announcement that St. Lucia will be joining the CCJ family. Thank you very much, Dr. Hilaire. The Honorable Madam Dame Janice Pereira, DBE LLD, has championed the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court's bid to host this conference, and she has been the chair of the local organizing committee. Chief Justice Pereira, I invite you to deliver your special remarks. Please welcome Chief Justice.
Thank you, Chief Justice George, I gratefully adopt the protocol that you have established, but permit me to recognize His Excellency, the Acting Governor General of St. Lucia, as well as the Acting Prime Minister, Dr. Hilaire, with us, the President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, and all of the heads of judiciaries who are present with us this morning. Good morning, colleagues, friends, specially invited guests from across the length and breadth of the Caribbean and further afield. I also join in warmly welcoming you to St. Lucia, Ayanola, Helen of the West, the largest state of our OECS family and the host state of the headquarters of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. It is truly, truly heartwarming to see so many of you here with us this morning after what seemed like a long and painful separation. For many of us, this will be the first time that we are seeing many of our colleagues and friends in person. I am so happy to see so many of our OECS judicial officers in attendance. And so we were to do this in 2021, but because of the COVID pandemic, we were allowed to pretend as if we are still in 2021, simply fast forwarded by a year, and continue to be asked to host this conference of judicial officers. In the intervening period, of course, we have lost a few of our loved ones, and we would hope that their souls rest in eternal peace. We are, of course, joined also by a few new ones, and I am delighted to have so many of us here. It is our great honor to host this conference of the Caribbean Association of Judicial Officers, known as the CAJO. This is the CAJO's 7th biennial conference, its signature conference since the birth of the organization in 2009. Since its inception, the practice has been to rotate the venue between the north and the south of the Caribbean countries. Its 6th biennial conference was held in Belize in 2019, and therefore came the OECS's turn. It was a difficult task trying to select out of our 9 beautiful member states and territories, which of our states should be the venue. So it is my hope that by the end of this conference, the island of St. Lucia will prove to have been an excellent choice. Of course, the question is, why gather? Why do we need a gathering of officers and others? There are many reasons. It was not too long ago, and I recall those days, that judicial officers across the Caribbean hardly knew each other, if at all, with very little avenues for sharing experiences or opportunities, or for learning new concepts and ideas, or to learn from each other in ways that could yield real benefits for the quality of justice being administered throughout our region. But Caribbeaners, being a resilient and innovative people, did not stand still. So we saw the establishment of the Judicial Education Institutes as an adjunct to various national judiciaries, and the willingness for inclusion in training and learning opportunities, not only among judicial officers, but indeed the legal profession. This must have all been fueled by the idea that there are benefits to be derived from forming and participation in legal and regional associations and broadening our horizons, building strength from a togetherness. It's therefore no surprise that CAJO was born, with its focus, as you have heard from the chair of CAJO, to provide judicial education opportunities across the Caribbean region and for bringing judicial officers together, whether by means of in-person or remote workshops and biannual conferences such as this. Over the years, the world has become a large marketplace. Our region is part of that marketplace, and judicial institutions have an integral role to play within that marketplace. The many factors influencing and shaping that marketplace undergo continuous change, sometimes slow and sometimes rapid, as we have seen over the past few years alone. We must therefore create ways and the means to keep pace with the changes and be ever engaged with an acute awareness of the challenges those changes bring. And more importantly, the ways and means by which judiciaries respond to those changes. All of this, of course, is to ensure that the quality of justice that we deliver is fit for purpose and meets the desired objective of upholding and maintaining the rule of law. Through this conference, the CAJO has created a space for us to do just that, to share our experiences as well as our challenges, and to contribute new and innovative ideas to keep pace with the changes in a mutually enriching forum. This conference theme, Caribbean Judiciaries in a Changing World, is quite timely. Listening to the news and viewing recent events occurring within our own region and around the world, it seems to depict and fuel a sense of turmoil, an awareness of many inequalities of every kind, in some cases challenging the very rules-based systems understood and accepted by societies, despite their unique qualities which make up our world. But even with all of this, there is that well-rooted anchor to which reference is made time and again by scholars of all dispositions and disciplines as the mainstay for ensuring civility, peace, and stability. That is the belief in and adherence to the rule of law. And judiciaries, like other institutions of our societies which adhere to the rule of law, remain committed to charting courses for what they believe would lead to a better future for mankind. The theme underscores this awareness, and it reflects the discussions and engagements which will take place over the next few days of this conference, with detailed deliberations and utter seriousness. Gatherings of this kind are essential as we forge ahead in strengthening shared values and in seeking solutions to common problems, while understanding and respecting that even within our comparatively small region, unique differences exist, which define us as a diverse yet uniquely Caribbean people. It enables us to explore those distinctions and gain a deeper understanding of our judicial role within our domestic and wider legal landscape, and the building blocks required for strengthening our capacity toward achieving court excellence. That said, our deliberations must be infused with lighter moments of fun and some frivolity. After all, this is the week of St. Lucia's celebration of Judicial, and the opportunity for bidding each other bonjour, and for delighting your senses in the rich Lucian culture. All of that should not be missed. It is my hope that you will take part in all the social activities we have planned, and that when you depart the shores of fair Helen, that she will have left you richer than when you came, with many pleasant and lasting memories. Finally, I simply wish to take this opportunity to thank our local organizing committee for all of the groundwork they have performed in seeking to ensure your comfort, safety, and enjoyment during your stay here. As our headquarters information services manager usually quips when we are planning an event, teamwork makes the dream work, and I adopt that phrase. I would also like to express my thanks and appreciation to the Honorable Prime Minister and the acting Prime Minister who is here with us this morning, Mr. Hilaire, representing the government of St. Lucia. We are grateful for the support of the government of St. Lucia and the assistance that they have afforded us in organizing and assisting us in hosting this conference. I also wish to place on record that I thank also all of the other heads of the OECS governments for their support and assistance. My wish and my hope are that this will be a successful, positively eventful, and memorable conference for us all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice Pereira, and for reaffirming the importance of our gatherings such as this, the camaraderie, the meet and greet, and the sharing of information and knowledge, all with a view to ensuring that we uphold the rule of law. Now we will have the privilege of sitting back and enjoying a cultural show which the local organizing committee of the conference has organized for our entertainment. I will invite the head table party to take the seats in the auditorium as we prepare to enjoy the cultural presentation.
We are more than islands. We are nations of diverse cross-cultural experiences through dance, music, language, and the love for the places we all call home. Let her inspire you. See the region through St. Lucia's rich cultural heritage as we take you on a journey of sound, movement, and spectacle.
Laissez maman moins, laissez maman moins, laissez maman moins, laissez maman moins, mais pas ni maman, laissez maman moins, maman moins Afrique, laissez maman moins, mais pas ni maman, laissez maman moins, maman moins l'argent, laissez maman moins, mais pas ni maman, laissez maman moins, il va dormir. Laissez maman ouais, moi pas ni maman. Laissez maman ouais, maman ouais Afrique. Laissez maman ouais, moi pas ni maman. Laissez maman ouais, maman ouais
Les autres, tout ça, non, femmes voulaient faire aussi. Bon, ces femmes n'ont pas monté, mais c'est pour nous payer pour nous. Ça, bon, ben, il pas bon. Mais moi, d'où les hommes, nous, en trois,
Moulala yonde toi, moulala yonde toi, la vérité dans toi, you the constant of non-being. Oh, please let me see, passez un petit oui, c'est moi d'où c'est mon salamati. Ça passe à jamais fait ici.
C'est nous, pas c'est ça, faites dans tout, on est pour finir et écoutez-nous bien, ou pas vous toucher, c'est le monde qui sous la terre, il y a ça, c'est ça, yo, Kadi,
Moulala yonde toi, la vérité dans toi, you the constant of non-being. C'est mon salamati. Ça passe à jamais fait ici. Oui, moulala yonde. Oui, moulala yonde.
vive la rose, maman et la rose.
Beautiful sunshine and the land of the cheese, yeah. It is what it is, say. Then I'm saying it is what it is, oh yeah. It is what it is. I'm chilling in the land of the boy. I'm a lucky, I'm blessed. I was born in the land of the West, but stand proud and big up my chest. Saint Lucia is a real vibe. Anybody visiting for the first time? If you visited for the first time, out in the air, we're taking away left to right, everybody move, left to right, say. It is what it is. And I'm saying it is what it is. Say, say, it is what it is. Then I say it is what it is, oh yeah. It is what it is. I'm chilling in the head of the. We are take over academically, physically, naturally, and the girl them look so nice. So no, it's a real vibe, it's real nice. No time girl, we sit back and chill. We're gonna take one more way. Everybody, hands in the air for Saint Lucia. Say, it is what it is. And I'm saying it is what it is. Oh yeah, it is what it is. The first sunshine of the land of the Jesus. It is what it is. Can I say it is? I want you to sing with me right now. Simple instruction. Now we go. Say, say, one more time. Hands in the air. 1, 2, 3. It is what it is. Can I say it is what it is? It is what it is. The first sunshine of the land of the cheese, yeah. It is what it is. But I say it is what it is. My name is Challenger from Saint Lucia. I love you. wine and go down like that, go down like that. Give me the girl who come to give the kind of wine to remember. The kind of girl who come to play so you can't call she no pretender. I love the way they just get on. So I don't care who watching on. Cause I just wanna wind up my body 1 foot off the floor. Come back again like we get a encore. Press on your body like a piano. I want you give me more and more. Wind up my body 1 foot off the floor. Come back again like we get a encore. Press on your body like a piano. I want you give me more and more, yeah. Girl, you're more than a million. You should be a billionaire. The way you whine and you put it down, yeah, yeah, yeah. I want you give me a chance, girl, to make your life a movie from just one dance. You see, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless, baby. Nothing you do, I go regret, baby. Could be the way you drop and fling bumper, say wine and go down like that, go down like that, go down like that. Fling bumper, say wine and go down like that.
Thank you very much to the LOC and the cultural troupe. It is what it is what it was. A really, really brilliant presentation. Let's give them a sure appreciation. Very colorful, very lively, a taste, a snapshot of St. Lucian culture. So, Acting Prime Minister, we have seen and we will continue to enjoy. CAJO is thrilled this morning to have as our keynote speaker someone who Justice Vivian Georges Taylor Alexander, Vice Chairperson of CAJO, will have the honor of introducing. So I invite Justice Vivian Georges Taylor Alexander to introduce our keynote speaker for our CAJO Conference 2022.
Thank you. The order of protocol having been established. Good morning, everybody. The former president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, was a man who was no stranger to adversity and was a central figure in South Africa's struggle to secure equality for all South Africans. He became infamous while incarcerated for 26 years within the four walls of the South African prison. At the 19 Heads of CARICOM conference held here in St. Lucia from the 30th of June to the 4th of July, 1998, Nelson Mandela, as a guest of the Heads of CARICOM, delivered an inspirational speech to the masses at Mindu Phillip Park in St. Lucia and reminded us that we as Caribbean territories are not limited by our size in being able to speak out and be heard and seen on global issues that impact us. He reminded us that here in our region there are examples of countries and persons who, despite limitations of size and resources, have indelibly impacted the world and were heard, seen, and respected for their commitment to their ambitions and the honesty of their views. From Jamaica, Bahamas, BVI and Cayman Islands in the north, to Barbados, Trinidad, Guyana, and Suriname in the south, Belize in the west, and the countries of the Eastern Caribbean and the ABC territories in between. The Caribbean territories have impacted the world with their natural resources, athletic prowess, music, food, Nobel laureates per capita population, and exceptional financial services delivery. In recent times, we have appeared overwhelmed and have underappreciated our value system. Our featured speaker exemplifies the character to which Nelson Mandela referred at Minder Phillip Park. She is a true Caribbean statesperson who battles to ensure that we as Caribbean people are defined in this rapidly changing world, that our positive contributions are recognized, and that our volatility caused by our size and our location on the globe is respected and protected. The Honorable Mia Mottley is the 8th Prime Minister of Barbados. She became the first woman to occupy the high office on the 24th of May, 2018. She's an attorney at law and senior counsel. Prime Minister Mottley has been active in the political life of Barbados for almost 3 decades. She also holds the portfolio of Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment. Since becoming Prime Minister, she has served as the chair of the Conference of Heads of Government of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, and as the co-chair of the Development Committee of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. She serves as co-chair of the Americas Cruise Tourism Task Force for the Caribbean, Mexico, Central and South America markets. She also serves as the lead head of government within CARICOM, bearing responsibility for the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. She serves as the co-chair of the World Health Organization's Global Leaders Group on antimicrobial resistance. In recent times, she has brought attention to the plight of Caribbean territories caused by global warming and has been instrumental in defining the role of the Caribbean territories in our changing world. Time magazine describes her as bold, fearless, and possessing a great intellect and wit. Coming to us virtually, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our featured speaker, the Honorable Mia Mottley, former Chairman of CARICOM and the Prime Minister of Barbados.
Thank you very much, Madam Justice Taylor Alexander. I am truly humbled by your introduction and simply say that I have become accustomed to just saying, please introduce me with my name. But I really want to thank you for very, very much your touching words. I want to say how delighted I am to speak to you. I really do wish I was in Castries this morning, but Prime Ministers occasionally reshuffle their cabinets, and I have recently done so. And this morning is the first morning that my cabinet will be meeting in its new format. And I therefore crave your indulgence and ask you to forgive me for not being present. But since I am a dutiful counsel, I will say that I hope that I will have an opportunity to be able to see each and every one of your lordships, your ladyships, and those of you who represent the judicial framework that we have in this region, and to say how well we want to be able to work with you in a way that allows the 3 arms of government to be able to treat to it. I am not sure that we are at a position that we have escaped the growing pains of becoming adults as countries. And I start there because in a very real sense, all of us come from countries that are basically 60 years old or less. Jamaica and Trinidad celebrated their 60th anniversary this year. My own country is on the verge of celebrating its 56th anniversary. And many of us have had, therefore, the process of growing up as nation states before us, but we are still feeling very much the growing pains of that exercise. And what do I mean? I've chosen today to share a few thoughts on some things that are fundamental to our change and transformation as a region if we are to go from strength to strength. And those things which in many instances will confront you on a day-to-day basis. In some instances, you will be able to exercise a level of judicial activism, which I encourage, but not necessarily in the format that has been replicated or to be replicated as we saw in the United States of America, where there almost seems to be a determination to be a part of the executive, but from a different perspective. Judicial activism is healthy, and I want to continue to encourage it. Indeed, the first judgment of the Caribbean Court of Justice in Barbados' case, in Boyce and Joseph, reflected a level of judicial activism that we warmly welcome. But I say that these growing pains are here because fundamentally we are in the grips of all kinds of crises as we face, first of all, those from outside, the climate crisis, to the pandemic that has literally stalled our societies for almost 2.5 years, and 3, the emerging inflationary and cost of living crisis that has come as a result of the war in Ukraine. But in addition to that, we have our own internal crises. Many of us are continuing to see an outbreak of violence that is unacceptable and does not bode well for us to move to the next level. I asked myself as we reflected on today with my officers, what really is also required of us at this stage? I feel that the whole issue of violence, as we've agreed at heads of governments, is a public health disease. And we have to come to grips with the fact that unless we change the psyche of our people and unless we allow our people to be to not be desensitized on the whole issue of violence and death, regrettably we will continue to see more of it. I feel strongly, as we've discussed, that we cannot continue to have a legal system that imposes criminal penalties for every breach of the law. And regrettably, in many of the colonial pieces of legislation that we have inherited, that has been the case. So for every breach, whether it is a regulatory breach or whether it is a substantive crime, the notion of fine and confine has been the penalties which we have accepted. We in Barbados are trying to move away from that and to introduce a system of civil penalties that will allow civil penalties to be used for regulatory breaches. And as I've said to the Cabinet recently, we need to introduce penalties that also allow those who dare to breach the social capital of a nation must be prepared to repair the social capital. And therefore, the penalties which are imposed on them ought to relate to those things which are necessary to repair that social capital. And what do I mean? If you are prepared to litter, if you are prepared to curse, if you are prepared to do things that bring down the social capital, well then let us put you to do the community service in areas that will repair the social capital. With respect to the regulatory breaches to which I've just spoken, if you are the ones who want to be able to have a system of governance that ensures that people comply, let us not believe that the only mechanism for compliance is a criminal penalty. And I give you perhaps one of the ones that stands out in my mind as an example. Former Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Basdeo Pandey, went before the law courts in his own country on the issue of breaches with the integrity legislation there. And those breaches that were occasioned were not substantive, but were procedural. Now, we ought to have different ways of separating penalties for regulatory breaches than criminal punishment for substantive crime. You commit rape, you commit murder, you commit burglary, you commit any of those genuine criminal offenses, criminal sanctions, criminal punishment. But when we start to deal with regulatory breaches, then I really do believe that we need a unified system of civil penalties across the region. It is important to move from the Victorian approach to law, and also let us begin to understand, and we can learn from indigenous tribes and indigenous people across the world, that what matters is how we repair the damage that is done. We as nation states are talking about reparatory justice for what has been done to our own and our people for centuries. We cannot now be the ones seeking to have only an adversarial system of justice which only serves to divide rather than to retain and repair the whole. And I hope that some of these things will resonate with you this morning, because our region more than ever, needs to be able to treat to these issues in a holistic way, and that recognizes that in many instances, those who are finding themselves before the law courts could, with a different approach, not be capable of the level of recidivism that regrettably we are seeing in small states. And this brings me to the next issue, which is difficult, because universal values are universal values, and universal rights are universal rights. But let us not forget that they have different consequences in the way in which we apply some of them. And this is the one that has given me the greatest discomfort. And for someone whose background has been in the area of the practice of criminal law, you would appreciate that this is not easy for me. I believe that people are entitled as a right, and we must protect it at all costs, to due process. I believe in the presumption of innocence. I believe that there has to be fairness in our systems. But I also believe that small societies, such as ours, cannot withstand the rate of recidivism, particularly with people on bail, that we are seeing in our societies. Regrettably, there are too many instances across the Caribbean where persons who have been charged with murder on bail again and are committing their second and third and fourth murder. Our societies are asking us serious questions, and we have to be prepared to do the balance. I believe that the balance can be found in expeditious trials. There is no right to bail, as you know, but equally, we have to be able to ensure that persons are not automatically given bail simply because the case has taken too long to come on and to be heard. And the consequences of that happening are tearing our societies apart, because really and truly, what does a man have to lose when he's already facing the greatest penalty that a country has to impose on him? And these are the things that are serious and real, and I hope that you can add to the conversation with respect to how the system of the administration of justice can be improved to ensure that persons charged with murder or persons facing gun crimes can all have their cases heard within a 6 to a 9 month period at first instance, and that the entire appellate process should take no more than 12 to 15 months thereafter. If we can do that, then it becomes a moot point to discuss the issues with respect to whether a person who is a murder charge should be given bail or not. I want, however, to not just only dwell in the area of the criminal law, but I'd like us to also reflect on some other aspects that are causing us grave concern and that we may well have to address in different ways. One of these areas relates to the development of administrative law in the region. I think it's been one of the greatest achievements of the region as a check and balance on the powers and the ability of the executive to ensure fairness and equity and reasonableness and transparency with respect to its actions as a government. I welcome the fact that Barbados' Administrative Justice Act is over 40 years old. But I ask myself as Prime Minister and as Minister of Finance whether the time has not come, as I've discussed with that great legal luminary who is no longer with us, Sir Roy Marshall, who was a previous Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and a Vice Chancellor of the University of Hull, and for my own benefit was my special advisor as Attorney General when I served in that post between 2001 and 2006. Whether the time has not come for us to impose caps on damages with respect to administrative law breaches. The truth is that the breach, if it has occurred, must be recorded and called out. But what is also equally true is that our countries, in a very strange way, facing all that we face as small island developing states or developing countries, cannot afford unlimited damages particularly given the fact that more often than not, many of these breaches are not even within the knowledge or purview of the executive at the highest level or the Ministry of Finance. And that when you have officers in large public services acting in ways that are in breach of their own rules, but nevertheless so acting, the state is held liable for it. I believe that we will have to be proactive going forward in the same way that I recognize, as that great former Prime Minister also of Barbados, Sir Harold Bernard St. John, told me at the beginning of my parliamentary career. He says, young lady, in our lives, you are going to have to come to grips with the fact that many of the things that we accept by convention will have to be legislated, largely because people come from different backgrounds and different perspectives in order to be able to deliver the work that is required as a nation state. And whether it is as simple as them having different influences depending on where they were educated, or whether it is different value systems because of where they were born or raised, the reality is that if we are to have certainty, we will need to be able to codify much of the conventions that we take for granted now. I use that as an aside, but the truth is that we have reached a point where I believe that there has to be a legitimate conversation about the capping of damages in administrative law. I do not believe that those who framed the legislation ever intended that the level of punitive damages or damages simpliciter was to be able to create a significant fiscal problem for government, but was more to reflect the fact that something was done and somebody has to pay the price for what was done. If that is the case, then let us agree, yes, we can do it, but let us cap the damages as has been done in other areas of the law. I also want this morning to speak to you frankly about a matter of where we are with the public confidence in our areas of establishment, be it in government or be it in the rule of law. You know, one of the reasons why I personally support the decriminalization of marijuana is because in my own country and over the course of my own life, I have seen people start to literally disregard the law. When I first came to public life, people would stand up at public events, football matches, and they would go and hide behind the stadium, or they would go down the road and smoke and come back. In the last 5-7 years, we have seen people just literally determine that it matters not. And I'm talking about both men and women. And they stand up and test the authorities in many instances. And where you're in a match that has 2,000-3,000 people on the ground, and you have maybe 10 policemen, I have watched the policemen literally retreat while others continue to do as they wish. The most important thing in a civilized society, the thing that defines us as nation states, is our ability to maintain the rule of law. And we have to ask ourselves as Caribbean people whether we have not reached a moment where the ultimate defense of the rule of law is what is necessary to save our societies and to preserve our capacity to grow from strength to strength. And I'm not only talking now then about the decriminalization of marijuana, but there are other laws within our midst that are regrettably observed more in the breach than are complied with. And when we reach a stage where laws are observed in the breach, then we as the executive, in my own view, have an obligation to change them. Because if we don't change them, it then means that there continues to be that aggressive disrespect for the rule of law, which can only serve to hurt us as a nation state and as a people. I trust and pray that this is one of the areas that will engage not just members of the judiciary, but all Caribbean people, because what is at stake is our quality of life if we are to be civilized societies governed by the rule of law, giving those who do not have the power of might a chance to survive. More often than not, the law is the only protection that people who are vulnerable or who are not strong or who are not wealthy have in order to protect themselves and the dignity of the life that they want to live. I really do hope, therefore, that we reflect on these matters and to ensure that we grow from strength to strength and to emerge from the growing pains, we need to be able to be sensitive to much of these things. The last point that I want to raise, and this, regrettably, every month I go to a different parish. And I sit down and I allow the parish, members of the parish to speak along with my ministers and heads of different agencies so that we hear what the population is saying in an unfiltered way. Because whatever they have to say, it is important that we hear and understand and are in a position to respond to it. And last night we did Christchurch Speaks, and it was unique because it was perhaps the night when the majority of the citizens chose to take on the system of administration of justice as well as the policing of our nation. And regrettably, we have to pause and ask ourselves, how can we be more responsive to what is emerging as a growing lack of confidence in the system's ability to meet the needs of ordinary people? I just finished speaking to you about the rule of law. I believe that it is the glue, it is the most important thing. In our own covenant of hope, which is what guides us philosophically as a political party, which we settled back in 2016, we have the ability to understand what matters to us most as a government. And the first thing that we put our commitment to in terms of our spending is the rule of law, the protection of the rule of law, because without that, the society cannot function. We then go to public health and education, etc. We have a situation where too many of our citizens are waiting for justice. Too long. And the delivery of judgments that go beyond 6 months, we use 6 months as a measurement. But the truth is that I feel strongly that we can do better in terms of the immediate delivery of judgments. But secondly, what people are complaining about is 6 years and 5 years and 7 years and 3 years. And this exposes the government to further liability as a result of those young and not so young lawyers who are creative and who may want to argue that there has been a breach of due process and that justice delayed is justice denied, and that our constitutional compact with them does not admit of that. We have therefore to see how best, all of us, those of us in the executive, in the case of criminal matters, working to make sure that the systems are deconstructed and reconstructed and intended to serve our people. We have to do it in the civil law with the registries and the systems that we put in place and deconstruct and reconstruct how we take evidence and how fast we move. And perhaps, with all due respect, and I don't say this in any negative way, we perhaps in our judgments not need to believe that every judgment needs to be a treatise, and that what matters more to people is the decision rather than the quality of literature, the quality of writing, the quality of references, the quality of quotations for us. And so long as the judgment is sound, then what matters more to people is the decision and the determination. I say this without hoping that I have stepped on any cords, but I'm saying this as a citizen of this Caribbean civilization, recognizing that where people lose faith in the institutions that they have, then they are more likely to take matters into their own hand. And I believe that the solutions that we bring to the table have to be collectively found, have to be discussed, have to be tested in terms of whether they're sustainable, affordable, etc. But more often than not, we can afford them. What matters, however, is the acceptance that there must be a red line in the sand, and that any judgment that goes beyond 6 months, and I would hope that they come within 2 and 3 months at most, and in some instances contemporaneously, any judgment that goes beyond 6 months is hurting our societies and our civilization. And we ourselves have passed amendments, but to pass an amendment alone without having the acceptance internally and intrinsically of all involved will not solve the problem. And I hope that one of the things that we will discuss going forward, and that you will discuss in your conference, is how best do we ensure that our Caribbean citizens do not lose confidence in the system of law to be able to resolve their issues. I feel strongly, and I've said to my people here, that I don't think we've made sufficient use of systems of mediation and conciliation. Has the time not now come for us to also take justices of the peace and provide training to them, so that in matters pertaining to minor offenses and minor conflicts and petty debt, that they're in a position at the level of parishes or districts to be able to resolve some of these issues? Because I accept that part of the difficulty is that our people have become far more litigious than they have been before. And therefore, the volume of cases that are coming before the courts place tremendous pressure on our judiciary. But I do believe that we are at that point. And I hope that we can get some feedback back from you as judicial officers on some of these complex issues, because in the true spirit of the separation of powers, I believe that you have a perspective that ought to be shared with us as members of the executive with respect to broad policy, without either of us interfering or getting involved in the day-to-day running of each other's business. But we need to hear you, and we will welcome your views on this and other matters. The very, very last point, perhaps, and as an adjunct to that, must be the issue of constitutional and parliamentary reform. Because if we're going to look at how we reform our judiciary and reform the expectations of our citizens, the question will beg itself, what of the Constitution? Most of our countries still carry the Constitution that we had at independence, which quite frankly speaks predominantly to the role of government, but not sufficiently to the role of governance. And that is the bridge that we now have to catch and to cross if we are to ensure that these constitutions are proper living documents suitable to the times in which we live. Similarly, our parliamentary reform needs to be more responsive to the nuances of Caribbean civilization, and to believe that it has to slavishly follow Westminster, especially in this year of 2022, may not necessarily be the wisest of decisions or beliefs that our people can anchor themselves to. We look forward, therefore, to hearing some of what comes out of your conference. I personally believe that we have reached a stage where we ought to be able to have a pilot, and I say so to all of your lordships from the different territories. I feel that in small societies, we benefit when there is some oxygen from outside. And what do I mean by that? That if we can settle on a framework that can be put before the Conference of Heads of Government, that can allow, not coming from us, but coming from you, because of the sensitivity with the separation of powers, but that allows for the exchange of members of the judiciary for periods of time, so that a judge from Barbados can sit in the OECS court for 3 months, or a judge from the OECS court can sit in the Court of Trinidad for 3 months, the High Court of Trinidad, or Guyana, or Jamaica. I believe that that ability to have a certain percentage of our judges be subject, and particularly where judgments are going to be given swiftly, will have the benefit of adding some freshness to our judiciary and adding some greater experience to those who are serving in ways that hopefully will inure to the benefit of us all. So my dear lordships, your lordships and your ladyships, I really do wish I was in Castries this morning, but as I said, due to the exigencies of the moment with respect to the cabinet reshuffle, I cannot be there. But I do hope that some of these issues that I've raised with you this morning will give you the ability to reflect and to share your perspective. These are things that as Prime Minister of Barbados that I've been reflecting on for some time. Some of them are in the process of us addressing, and some of them are still at the stage of conversation. And I therefore would more than welcome your perspective on some of these issues, so that we as a Caribbean civilization can go from strength to strength to strength. We are at a difficult moment in our history, and we are at the stage where, even as we speak, the number of countries that are coming perilously close to a debt moment are regrettably too many. That is why we have launched the Bridgetown Initiative globally, recognizing that we need to be able to address liquidity for countries urgently, and that is affecting what countries can do for its citizens because of the triple crisis to which I referred earlier, that we need to be able to accept that development capital needs to be long-term. We want to spend more money. I want to establish a family court in Barbados that removes the distinction, for example, between the magistrate's court where women who are not married go and stand up like if they're cattle, and the high court where married people go and wait long. We need to have a single family court that addresses the issues of how to keep the family whole even in separation. And why do I say so? Because it's the children that suffer, and it's the children that carry the scars for life, and that those children will not be in a position to be the most productive citizens if we can't. But in order for us to establish that family court, it takes dollars. We've done a commercial court recently. I've increased the number of criminal courts. Even as we speak, I'm increasing them by another 3 in order to deal with the fact that 80% of the murders that are before our law courts today predate us coming to government in June of the end of May of 2018. And almost 80% of the gun cases predate our coming to government. And if, therefore, we are to find the money to be able to address some of these issues within the justice sector, we need to be able to have access to long-term capital. And regrettably, the world has siphoned and pushed countries like ourselves into only accessing short-term capital, which cannot build our nations. I use the example all of the time as to the fact that when the UK literally raised money to fight World War I in 2014 and 2017, by 2032 it recognized that it needed to reissue that bond and to give itself time to repay it, because it could not pay both to fight the war and fight to rebuild the nation while first servicing short-term capital. They did it for the UK. When Germany lost the war, the great powers of the world came together and determined that Germany should not have to pay more than 3% of its debt service. 3% of its export revenue, in debt service. And these are the things that they have allowed in the developed world, but have regrettably not been replicated in our world. I believe that we need reform of our justice sector. We need to also be as creative in the 21st century as others were in the 20th century. I make the point, and the Chief Justice of Barbados is there, and I hope he will share it. Title suits, foreclosure suits, that, we call it whatever you want. They have different names here. But that ability for Barbadians for almost 100 years to translate possession of land into ownership through a fictitious mortgage suit, ultimately ending up in a registrar's conveyance, which is perfect title, allowed our people to be able to transition from poverty to being able to leverage the assets that they had possession of in the banking system in order to move to the next level. These are, in the way that Hernando de Soto talks about in his great book, The Mystery of Capital. These are the things that matter. But if we can't borrow or access long-term capital, and if long-term capital from the international financial institutions does not move from billions to trillions, and if we don't recognize that instead of only dealing with the reduction of poverty, which is and must be the ultimate noble goal, that the World Bank also has to deal with global public goods, also has to deal with the fact that whatever we do, a pandemic anywhere can decimate the world everywhere. Or the climate crisis, as we are seeing with the apocalyptic floods in Pakistan, or with the heat waves and the melting of tarmacs and the wildfires that we've seen in this summer. Extension of what we face in the region from hurricanes and groundwater crises, and the destruction of our coastal environment, and of course the sargassum seaweed, which continues to be part of the chronic nuisances that we face and that reduce the ability of those people on the coast to be able to earn properly because of the toxic smells coming from it. These are the things that we must fight, and we continue to fight. And finally, that even when money is available, because many of our countries have had to carry the burden of adjustment without the sensitivity to size, be it related to the WTO coming in and refusing to accept special and differential treatment as part of our reality as small states, that in its failure so to do, we have seen the decline of our manufacturing and agricultural sectors in every country in the region after the WTO, with the exception of maybe one country. And secondly, that with Resolution 1393, as you would most probably know, that this slavish belief as to what is necessary to fight money laundering and terrorism financing has so hobbled us that it has made us anti-competitive and is used as a whip against us in order to restrain what we can do and to impose an uncompetitive environment within which we must function. These things have all happened in a way that makes it difficult for us to survive as nation states. And we simply say that our balance sheet, therefore, in order to fight these things, in order to fight the new global public nuisances and risks that we have, we are constrained because our debt to GDP ratio in almost every Caribbean country has gone high, not because of profligacy or corruption or any of those things per se, but it is because of us having to function in a non-competitive environment, having come to independent states without the benefit of capital being deployed to us in terms of reparatory justice in any way. And therefore, we can't develop key parts of our society, like the judiciary, like our education sector, like our health sector, unless we find greater room. But the climate crisis, as it comes down, is real. So what are we suggesting also finally in the Bridgetown Initiative? That we have an international balance sheet that allows us to put that money on the international balance sheet rather than imposing it on our own peculiar national debts, which then crowds out our ability to spend on you, spend on health, spend on education. So my friends, I've spoken far longer than I intended to, your lordships, your ladyships, but I hope that I've left you with a few thoughts. I'm not feeling the best, and I hope I wasn't too nasal this morning, but I hope that you are in a position to be able to reflect on some of these things and to share with us as leaders in this region so that we can collectively make this great Caribbean civilization the best that it can be. Thank you, and may all of you be blessed as you undertake the work as judicial officers for this great civilization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Motley. I must tell you that you are our star attraction. Whether virtual or in person, our star attraction. I want to say that we were very, very enthused when you accepted our invitation to address us this morning. I thank you for your wide-ranging discourse, lots of food for thought, for charging us to do things differently, to be more responsive in the administration of justice, to repair harm, but maintain balance, while upholding the rule of law, ensuring confidence in the administration of justice, as we aim to continue the development of what you call and we endorse our Caribbean civilizations. Thank you very, very much on behalf of the CAJO. A round of applause, please. Prime Minister Motley. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, and I will take my leave from you, and I wish you all the very best in the rest of your proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Friends of CAJO, members of CAJO, this brings us to the end of what has been an engaging and enthralling opening ceremony. Just some housekeeping before we break. Just to remind you about the CAJO Code of Conduct. It's all in your bags, your conference bags. Importantly also the feedback forms. We have a new way of doing it this time around. There's a QR code in your program, in the booklet. Just scan it with your